The investment in food tech keeps coming, Chipotle's use of RFIDs, and the latest on labor. That's all ahead on this week's Monday Minute. Monday Minute works like this. We're going to ask each other 5 questions from the last week's biggest restaurant industry headlines that relate to our book, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. Are you ready? Let's go.
The first question is for you, Carl. The company Thanx, which is a loyalty platform, acquired Zero Storefront this week. First of all, tell us what that is, and then what do you think's behind the acquisition?
Well, Thanks and their founder was featured in our book, of course, and we really like Zach Goldstein's reference to what he calls Loyalty 3.0 and how he talks about restaurants and their antiquated use of rote discounting in relation to loyalty. And we learned of Zero Storefront and introduced CEO Colin Wallace, who's an ex-Grubhub employee, to Zach last year in one of those conference corridor conversations.
Oh,
And
wait,
so
so are you taking credit for
I'm
this?
taking credit for it. I'm pretty sure we did it, Meredith. It was you as well. Colin's a smart guy, Zach as well, of course. And so I think he's not only just acquired a great product here, but a great team. And both of these guys see the world of where things are heading pretty clearly. And like us, I think they see that customer data is the future lifeblood of our industry. And so seeing these two sets of capabilities come together is quite exciting. In the article that we referenced below, Goldstein says data analytics and insights is not something that's currently heavily in demand, but he does believe that in the near future it's going to be a major differentiator. I think this is going to be really interesting to watch how these two products come together. So, what do the insights bring? How do we potentially see this happening? Now, I think the insights will drive a better understanding of how loyal customers behave when presented with something new. So, rather than discounting, how can you drive true customer loyalty through something like exclusivity or perhaps invites to special events, free swag, all that kind of stuff? And I think Zero Storefront, and now kind of Wallace taking up his role as a VP of Insights, Thanks are going to be able to help restaurants really figure out the answers to those questions and which mechanisms drive loyalty in the most optimal manner. Okay, our second question this week is about Sodexo. They've been in the news about something they're doing with relation to college campuses and off-premise innovation. Care to tell us more?
Yeah, so Sodexo, for those of you not familiar with them, is a very large French company that does a lot of what's called B&I kitchen cooking. So they are providing the restaurant or cafeterias at schools, in hospitals, at offices, things like that. And they have been on a warpath to really push to innovate and not just offer the same old thing. And for those of you who went to college long ago, like me, I'll date myself a bit here. You remember what it was like. You had one place you could go, one cafeteria, and they had a few different lines. There are not a lot of great choices. And you would make friends with the one person on your floor who had a car so that you could go to the grocery store once a month and get a few things. And that was college, right? And now everything is so different. So I have a nephew who's in college right now. And his mom says to me the other day, "Oh, I really missed him. So I sent him a little care package of all of his favorite things from the grocery store via Instacart." And I was like, "What? That's amazing. Of course you can do that." Like thinking through that seems obvious, but wow, that is so different from my life growing up and going to college. The idea that my parents from thousands of miles away could just pick a bunch of things and have someone show up at my door with my favorite grocery items. It's crazy. So one of the things they're doing is grocery delivery. Another one of the things that they're doing is a robotic ramen kiosk, which is very cool and brings a bunch of innovative choice and probably low prices and low labor costs as well. And then the final thing is 3 virtual brands. And in particular, Mr. Beast Burger is very popular with this demographic. And so being able to offer it on college campus, it's a little bit like being able to take one of the big national brands like Chick-fil-A and license them and put them on college campus, which is something that these companies also do. But it is the first time that we've really seen them taking a virtual brand and doing that rather than an existing brick and mortar mainstream national brand. So it's all very exciting. I'm good for Sodexo for really pushing the envelope here. Okay, Carl, the future of food tech. said food tech investment is going to continue strongly in 2022 after a record 2021. So, what's happening?
Yeah, the conference here is actually one that's attributed to something called Future Food Tech, and it was held last week in San Francisco. And the sentiment was that money is just going to keep flowing into the industry in 2022. Now, don't forget, as you just mentioned, this is after 1,000 deals, nearly $13 billion worth of investments in 2021, which was double that of 2020. And actually, we found another article in Food Dive that said VCs invested 40 billion or nearly 40 billion in 2021 across 1,400 companies. So both numbers are huge, of which 6 billion was actually invested in products, ingredients, and R&D. And it's expected to support a global market worth 32 billion last year, which has also therefore grown to something like 46 billion in 2026. So there's a lot of money going into something which is believed to be a much larger market in the years ahead. Now, food tech, of course, is beyond just the realm of restaurant tech that we often speak about. So let's be clear on that. But it does show that the entire ecosystem of food, agriculture, science, restaurants is going through this kind of technological renaissance, if you will. And I guess the question for me, Meredith, is what is it that's driving this? What is driving this level of bullish belief in this sector? Is it the macroeconomic factors around expectations on food demand around the world, given population growth? Is it the climate agenda? Or is it the vast levels of waste that we see and therefore the efficiencies that potentially being gathered through technology being harnessed? So I think a lot of those items are probably true. And I think it comes down to what we reference in our book, which is it comes down to the consumer and that driving the digitization of restaurants. But I think it's happening across everything in food and really consumers' interest and understanding of what they're putting into their body. And we often talk, especially in chapter 2, we talk about vegetarianism, veganism, flexitarian diets. Here's a stat for you. I've got a question for you. Pop quiz, Meredith. 2004, how many vegans do you think there were in the US?
2004 as a percentage of Americans?
Absolute number.
Absolute number. I'm going to go with 14,000.
290,000. 2019, it's 9.7 million. Maybe that's the reason we're seeing such a level of investment.
Wow, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. I do think consumers are changing incredibly rapidly, and all of the things that you just mentioned are driving this change. But when consumers change this much and their expectations change this quickly, there's a huge amount of business opportunity.
Our fourth question is more about the labor environment and the Great Resignation. Do we have any good news to share?
Yes and no, I would say a little bit of both. So it is continuing, which is probably the bad news. Folks are still resigning in very large numbers, record numbers, in fact, from the hospitality industry. But good news, we're also adding jobs and we're getting closer and closer to the level of employment you saw in the hospitality industry before COVID. We're still running about 6% below where we were before COVID, but we're getting there, getting back at it. One thing that I want to highlight here is what is causing this great resignation. And certainly there's a lot of sociological reasons behind it in terms of the realizations people had during the pandemic about what mattered to them and what was important. And a bunch of people getting laid off at the beginning of the pandemic certainly gave them the time and space to think about those things. But there is also the fact that labor is fungible and the baby boomers are retiring. And that creates a huge amount of opportunity for everyone else. And what I mean by that is if you look at the Boston Fed did a study of what's happening, this lack of labor and the problem in the labor markets, and they found that really what's going on is baby boomers are retiring. The average baby boomer is basically retirement age, and so they're leaving the workforce. And as that happens, although the hospitality industry skews toward younger employees, because labor is fungible, all of a sudden a whole bunch of opportunities open up that maybe weren't available before. And these folks can start to think about what else might I want to do and where else might I want to go. They have the luxury of being in demand elsewhere. And so they can set their terms and go where they want. So when you think about this great resignation and what's happening, you really have to think about your competition for these workers very broadly and think about all of the opportunities that they have right now, all of the things they could be doing. It's not just the restaurant down the street, right? It's, do I leave the restaurant industry entirely and go get a desk job? Do I become an Uber driver, right? There's so many new things that have opened up to them that without thinking broadly about that competitive set and how your wages, benefits, culture stack up against those other types of jobs, you're going to be in an uphill battle to keep these employees in your restaurants.
But tell us the story about the nurse that you met this week and now has given up nursing to be an Uber driver.
Goodness, this was amazing. Yeah, I was in an Uber this week and my driver told me that he makes $160,000 a year as an Uber driver, which is fantastic and good for him. And he also is a registered nurse. So he has gone to school and trained and gotten certified to be a nurse, gone through all of this. And he's actually taken his hours down as a nurse. He still does a little bit of work in nursing, but taken his hours down as a nurse to work more as an Uber driver. And he said, I make more money. I get paid more quickly, and it's not as stressful on my body. Being a nurse is a lot of hard work, a lot of walking, a lot of lifting. And that I think tells you everything, right? Like, why would you ever think, oh, we're losing nurses to Uber? Like, that wouldn't even occur to you in a normal labor market, but that's the kind of thing that's happening. All right. Last question, Carl, for you. Chipotle has been improving their inventory and food safety controls with RFID tags. Talk a little bit about that.
Have you ever had to manage through a food safety recall, Meredith? I have lots of times. From being someone that was accountable to ensure it got done right across the 1,000-unit chain, it's a huge ordeal. There's a lot of time. The public never really gets to hear about it, but it really does require a detailed process to manage across a large chain. Back at AMPM when I was at, we had several happen throughout the year, usually around 3 p.m. on a Friday, which was a real pain. And so within an hour of notification from a food supplier, every field manager gets a message detailing the code of the food supply box affected, the instructions on what to do, search, isolate, report back, counted exactly how many items. And then obviously finance gets involved because franchisees and the like need to get compensated. I would estimate it probably takes about 100 to 200 hours at least of an organization's time per 1,000 sites. And so I tell you that Chipotle has done with introducing RFID tags, which are radio frequency ID tech, it basically is going to enable better traceability of food. And it's also going to enable proactive notifications of impending food expiration dates, perhaps a better means to eliminate human error. Each store will have a specific number of those tags attributed to it. So the field management should know exactly what to look out for. Add to that then the benefits of improved inventory control. It's another example of how Chipotle are using tech to basically enhance their operational efficiencies, whilst also taking them away from that food safety scandal from about 7 years or so ago, when obviously they really had a lot of hurt from it. And so seeing them do this is a great example of how not only can you take food safety seriously, but also you can drive efficiencies into your operation too.
Yeah, and make the lives of your employees better too. They're doing less counting in the cold room. Done that before too. So now Chipotle is very forward leaning. They're applying a lot of tech in very interesting places. Do you think this is going to become common in the industry?
I think it might be over time. I think the question is, will it be RFID tags or will it be some other form of technology that helps? The reality for me is that with the amount of food that is being delivered into companies of this size, it makes a lot of sense. Smaller players, which are perhaps locally sourced in their food, it might not make as much sense for them. It might be a bit more difficult. But certainly for the bigger chains, yeah, for sure, I can see this happening quite a lot. Okay, look, there we are, end of another Monday Minute. Can you believe it's rushed by almost 15 minutes? Hope you guys have enjoyed this week's edition. As ever, please leave your questions, your comments below. Let us know what you've liked, what you've disliked, what you'd like us perhaps to cover in a future edition. But until next time, thanks for listening. The Monday Minute is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Watch us on YouTube and follow us on all our social media Learn Dr. Livery channels. Thanks for listening.